Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Welcome to the Shaarei Teshuva Chabora. This is the sefer we're using. If you have one, great. If you don't, follow along. I'm so glad to be back here with you guys. Here we have people on Zoom, and I know that hundreds of people watch afterwards. Today's subject, it's a little depressing, right? Because there's two paragraphs. The 18th and 19th paragraph of Sharbet. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the death of the wicked, which, because we're not wicked, it shouldn't be so depressing. And probably what I'm going to title this year is, because most of the material is in paragraph 19. The descent and the ascent. In other words, of the wicked and the righteous. So there's going to be a great separation. And we'll see where that leads to. It's just a fantastic class, an amazing material. And I just want to mention before we begin that the class is dedicated to the Refuah Shelemah of Rav Pinto. His Hebrew name is Rabbi Yoshiyahu Yosef Ben Zahri. Okay, so here we go. Da. That's yes in Russian. That's all I know. No, there's one more word I know in Russian, and that's soup. What does that mean? Soup. You know, marak. Soup in Russian is the same as in English. Okay, so now you know at least two words in Russian. Oh yeah, I know a third one. Niet. Placebo? I can't even pronounce it, but yeah. Okay, so here we have the da. You should know. Ki nefesh harasha, the soul of an evil person, asher kol ta'avata l'chetzei aguf b'chayav. All that person does is chase after the desires of this world. This is going to be a main theme here. How do we know who's righteous and who's not? Well, we're not so concerned about others. Let's just concern ourselves with ourselves, okay? We have the choice, free will. Where do we belong? On the ascension, are we going up or are we going down? It's just interesting that I heard from a dear friend of mine, Rabbi Educator, who has spoken for Yiboneh quite a number of times. We have to get him again. Mentioned through the Hasidic masters that the word Rasha, which is spelled Reish Shin Ayin, but nevertheless Rasha, is related to the word Rash. What's Rash? Rash is noise, right? When you think about someone who's in shalva, someone who's at peace, someone who meditates, someone who prays, someone who has, and look, not every righteous person is zoche to a real peaceful life, I understand, but to try for clarity, where you don't have all this background noise. So the Russia is interested in this world, in the taivas, in the desires, in the physical pleasures of this world. That's what a Russia is, and that's what we're going to see tonight, today, this afternoon, this morning, wherever you are in the world, whenever you're listening to this. So you should know that a wicked person's soul, which during the actual lifetime desires nothing other than physical pleasures. V'nifredet tavata me'avodas haboire v'nivdelet misharsha. Basically, the desire itself is separating the person from the service of God, and therefore they're disconnecting themselves from the heavenly source. The reason I mentioned about Rosh, because this is how it used to work on television. Not that I'm a bucky, but there used to be a thing that if you turn the channel, people used to have antennas on their roof. And basically, if you're in between channels, you get white noise. And what this person explained to me, my Charus actually, Dr. Moshe Kor, he said basically your receiver is receiving everything. And when you turn to a specific channel, it's like a filter. You're blocking everything else out except for that particular channel. And that's why you get a clear picture, clear noise and whatnot. Now, he said this early on when the internet just came out, and he assumed it was the same thing. It may or it may not be, but try to imagine is that your computer is like really receiving everything all at once, therefore it receives nothing. But once you put a URL, some kind of an address, it's like a filter that's blocking everything else out except for that, and then you have a clear screen, exactly the address that you wanted. I mean, the same thing can work. I mean, if you choose your imagination. Again, I don't know if it's true, but you want to write an email to somebody. If you don't have the right address, it's going to go everywhere, which really means it goes nowhere. It goes absolutely nowhere. And so all this noise creates chaos in an evil person's life, where he has no clarity of the value of life. Right? I mean, just use your imagination. Listen, it fits my mold. The question is it true or not? I have no idea, but it sounded good, at least when it came to white noise, as i.e. noise, Rash. And this is from the Hasidic masters from way long ago. So there has to be some aspect of deep truth in it. So we go on. Tered b'moisai, when the person dies, when the wicked person dies, he'll go down, lamata, la'aretz, to the earth, el mokom tavata, the place where his desires are for, meaning the physical, right? Physical desires. So his soul attached. Remember, there's 5 levels of your soul. We're going to be discussing what we call the neshama, which is basically the higher level of the bottom 3, which everyone has. Okay, so the higher soul is called the neshama, but then we have a nefesh, which is in the blood, that's the animal soul that we all have. And that's in the blood, and that is really attached to the body and the earthly desires and needs. So we have a constant struggle between our higher soul and our lower soul. Okay, 1 second. So basically, the Russia has attached themselves so much to this lower part that they will descend to the earth, which was the focus of its desire. Vi toladata kateva ha'afar leredet velo la'alot. Now, the nature of this soul, this wicked soul, is just like, it will be like the dust of the earth in which it came from. But it will go down because it's heavy, right? That's what it looked for Gashmias. Gashmias is physicality, and therefore it will go down and it will not ascend. Well, 1 second. It will go up for a judgment and then go back down. We'll talk about that. Aval ya'aluha lamarom ledin ulemishpat. It actually will ascend at some point, temporarily for judgment. V'lirot ech chalifa marom b'shaul. And it's going to be tried and judged why it made the decisions in its lifetime to exchange what could have been a supernal spiritual existence, and it instead decided where its priorities were, which was of the physical world. And therefore, the great question of the time of judgment is like this: to be tried and judged, and to see how it foolishly exchanged heaven for basically a word for hell, Gehenna. The word he uses is called Sheol. Kasher yalu et even al yedei kaf hakela. Now this is interesting because probably many have heard of this concept of kaf hakela. It's called a slingshot. It's similar to Gehenna, but I think it's worse. Okay, because at least in Gehenna there's a time for purification, and it's limited. Kaf hakela, thank God I don't know that much about this, but it's discussed in the Sfarim HaKadoshim as like a slingshot, as if the soul is being shot, like through a slingshot, from one end of the universe to the other, and the soul will experience such, I have no other word to say except hell, right? Such anxiety and fear through this exchange. Okay, so where do we know this from? So this is an amazing thing. We're going to see shortly in 1 Samuel chapter 25, verse 29. But before we get there, there is a comment about this slingshot that I want to read for you. It's number 3 on, if you're using our book, it's 184. Rebbeinu Yona refers here to the punishment known as kaf hakela. It's called a slingshot, which is mentioned in many of the Sfarim. According to Rebbeinu Yona, a primary component of the suffering of this punishment is the tremendous pain that the soul experiences after it has been made aware of the sublime experience it has forfeited. In other words, the shock of having made the wrong decisions is, I guess, re-experiencing such an experience of being shot forward. Now, what happens when you shoot a slingshot? I don't know, I've never shot one. But basically, we're talking about goes against gravity. There's a force called gravity, which wants to bring the ball down, the rock down. Nevertheless, you're shooting it up. You're shooting it up by, I guess you're swinging around this piece of leather on a string, and it's going up against gravity. So there's a force trying to push it down, and yet you're shooting it in the other direction. So he mentions like this: V'achrei alosa lemarom tered beteva lamata laaretz. Right? So too, that's what happens to the soul. After the soul's gone up to the heavens, for the purpose of this visit of this judgment, it's no longer kept there, but it will fall naturally down to the earth. As I mentioned, the similarity of the slingshot. Kasher even chozeret v'nofelis laaretz acharei hazarika. So too, just as the stone falls back to earth after it's been thrown upward by the slingshot. Now, where do we get this whole idea from? So those who know Tanakh, right, we're going to go to 1 Samuel 25, verse 29. Abigail, which was a prophetess, she was one of the great numbered amongst the female prophets. And she said, when she saw Dovid, she fell at his feet and said, Chayes nefesh adoni tzrura b'tzrura chaim et Hashem Elokecha. She said, may my Lord, meaning Dovid, may his soul be bound up in the bond of life with Hashem your God. Ve'et nefesh oivecha yikalena betoch kaf hakela. Was she cursing his enemies? No, she was saying what's going to happen to them. These enemies of Dovid were evil, so she said, and your God, may he hurl the soul of your enemies as one shoots a stone from a slingshot. So the comment here says, Abigail said this when she pleaded for Dovid to spare the life of her husband, Naval. Among other things, she stated that Dovid's enemies should, after they die, suffer the fate of the wicked. Abigail was a prophetess, and her words here were divinely inspired. They are thus taken as an accurate description of the fate of the wicked. So this is how we know. Okay, we know from the Tanakh. The Tanakh is telling us that Abigail is expressing what will happen, the fate of the wicked. And Chazal tell us, V'amru zichron levracha b'midrash mishle, in the Proverbs, in the Midrash of Proverbs, Achas nishmatan shel tzadikim, v'achas nishmatan shel rishoyim, olat lemarom, that after death, both the souls of the righteous and the souls of the evil, they go up to heaven to be judged. Ella, but what happens? Shenishmatan shel rishayim chozrot liyoradot umitarfot laaretz. The souls of the wicked, we're talking about extremely wicked, subsequently descend crashing down to the earth. And that's what it means when she said, Ve'et nefesh oivecha yikalena. Right? That the souls of your enemies, may he hurl the soul of your enemies as one shoots a stone from a slingshot. Now we're on page 185. I mean, this is really deep insight. Number one, when you read Psalms, the richness, the wealth of information, and this is King David. I mean, you know, one of the greatest souls that ever lived. And the insight. So now it says, V'nemar, we're on page 185. B'mois adam rasha toivei tikva. It says in Mishlei, that's King David's son. King Solomon says in chapter 11, verse 7, when the wicked man dies, hope is lost. Unbelievable. What do you mean? Why would hope be lost? Ki lo tihi tikva lenefesh harasha. There's no hope. There wouldn't be any hope for a evil soul, letzeit michoshek laor, for the wicked person's soul to escape the darkness of what we call Gehenna, to end up in the light of the Garden of Eden, in Gan Eden. Shneimar al nefesh harasha, as it says in Psalms, King David himself, in 49, verse 20, Tavo ad dur avotav ad netzach lo yiru'ur. It shall go to the generation of his fathers. Until eternity they shall see no light. The commentaries explain this verse is speaking about the soul of a wicked person whose ancestors were also wicked. So we're talking about a very wicked person who had obviously free choice, but chose to follow in their father's footsteps and not do tshuva. This would be considered an extremely wicked person. All right? Now we're in 19. So that was quite short. Most of the material here is going to be dealing with 19. And as I mentioned earlier, we're talking about the ascent of the righteous soul. How do we know? Has anybody gone there and come back? We were standing at Mount Sinai. We spoke face to face with Hashem. And the prophets later revealed much of what had been revealed earlier. Okay, so this is divine information. Rebbeinu Yona now continues discussing the fate of the wicked. What happens to the wicked person's soul? Hine nitba'er ki nishmas rashoyim yoredis l'shol. He already discussed that the wicked soul will go down to what we call Gehenna, Sheol. Mishnei mikra'os zekranu midabrehem zekranu levracha. We're going to mention two specific verses in which the rabbis derive this information. The first one is in Mishlei, that's Proverbs 15:24. It says, how do we have it here? The path of life leads upward for the one who uses his intellect. Orech Chaim, the way of life. Lamala lamaskil. It's going to ascend higher and higher for who's a maskil. I want you to word the word seichel. Okay, we would translate maskil as enlightened. That's true. I would translate it as enlightened. But what does that mean? In terms of every translation is an interpretation. So in Rambam, Maimonides' terminology, a seichel is intellect. Pure, unadulterated, really pure intellect. Seemingly a rationalist. In terms of the Maharal, he would explain it as spirit, soul. As you probably know, I'm very familiar with the Kliyakar. He uses the word seichel in the same way that his Rebbe, the Maharal, would use it. But I would like to put them together, both of these, I guess, interpretations, together to say it's the spiritual intellect. And this way, we make no mistakes, okay? That it's a spiritual intellect that we're dealing with. Okay, so now if we understand that, we're going back to the verse again. The path of life leads upwards for the one who uses his spiritual intellect, so that his soul will turn away from Sheol below. And there's an interesting comment. By using one's intellect to control one's physical desires. Now that's why I think spiritual intellect really fits in well, because we're talking about using your intellect in a spiritual way, steering it away from your physical desires. If, however, let me read on. By using one's intellect to control one's physical desires, the path of life leads him heavenward. You will ascend. You will go towards heaven. If, however, one fails to allow his intellect to lead him, meaning his soul, his spiritual intellect, he will inevitably end up in Gehenna. So let's continue. Now we just said basically this verse. This too demonstrates that the wicked person's soul is destined for hell, Sheol. So Rebbeinu Yona explains another verse that mentions the fate of the soul after death. And now we're going to go to Koheles. Again, King Solomon. This is Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verse 21. He says like this. Who knows? Now this sounds like a question. And the Rebbeinu Yona is going to go at great length to explain how one could be misled. You don't know the oral Torah. You don't know what's being said. You have no tradition. You would think King Solomon is in doubt himself about what happens to the soul after you die. But no, King Solomon knows exactly what's going to happen, and he doesn't pose it as a question. although we will read it as a question. Who knows the spirit of man that ascends on high, and the spirit of the beast that descends down into the earth? Now, what does he mean by asking this question? Perush. The explanation is as follows. Mi yakir tzadikim v'rashoyim b'olam hazeh. He's asking the question, who are you to make any judgment? Only God knows. That's what he means. The meaning of the verse is King Solomon is asking rhetorically, who can recognize, mi yakir, who recognize who's righteous and who's wicked in this world? As we will see through the continuous discussion here, there are many people who seem evil, but they do so many righteous acts in private. So they don't excel in righteousness in public, but they are extremely righteous in private. And there are other people who may act and dress the part of being righteous. And in secrecy, they do all kinds of evil things. Only one person, only one entity, only one thing knows the truth. And that's Hashem himself. So the question was, who can recognize, right? So we asked like this. Ki yesh rishoyim asher ma'aseim b'machshach v'lo yabiru behem b'nei adam, yakiru b'nei adam. There are wicked people whose deeds are performed in secrecy, meaning positive things, and are therefore not recognized people as wicked. I'm sorry. There are wicked people that do their wicked acts in privacy, and you wouldn't know that they're wicked. V'yesh yirei shamayim b'seiser, and there's some that really have awe, a really healthy sense of awe of God in secret, as we see in Micha, right, one of the prophets, in chapter 6, verse 8, where it says, "V'hatznei alechet im elechecha." This is a directive that one should walk with modesty with Hashem. One should walk with Hashem. Maybe it means secretly, but it's modest, right? Not trying to get all the fanfare. I was discussing this morning. We have many people whose names are on the walls of great institutions, and you may think, hopefully mistakenly, and you don't think this way, but maybe you think, oh, these people, they just want to have their names on the wall. That's why they gave them money. First of all, you don't know that. Many times, a fundraiser will try to convince the donor who came and said, I want to give this anonymously, or I'm not interested in my name on the wall. But they convince this person that if you give, we can get from 5 other people who are in your same tax bracket, your same economic sphere. Because when they see you put it up, they want to also donate a similar amount of money. Well, guess what? This person says, well, I don't want to be used for that. So, hopefully, the fundraiser will say, I want you to speak to your rabbi, see what he has to say. And the rabbi may convince him that the fundraiser is absolutely correct. Maybe that's the way to go. However it is. Or put at least in memory of somebody, and then you realize, well, that was that guy's father or grandfather, and you can put 2 and 2 together. Maybe his name wasn't so prominently displayed, but everyone knows it's him. Right? There's different ways. So just because somebody did something publicly doesn't mean that they themselves had nefarious motives, right? Not so high motives. You don't know. So we don't know. So that's one of the ideas just brought down. The whole verse in Micha 6:8, what does Hashem ask of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk modestly with your God? Now I just want to mention the number 5, the comment. This doesn't mean, this does not mean that when they are in the company of people they commit sins or refrain from doing mitzvahs that must be performed at that time. Rather, to the greatest possible extent, they hide their good deeds and attempt to perform them while no one is watching. Okay, so basically it's impossible for us to identify who is righteous and who is not righteous. And that's what King Solomon is talking. But he's mentioning more than that, because he talks about the ascension of the soul, who is like man, and we'll discuss what is man, versus the spirit of the beast. What is the spirit of the beast? I guess you can take a guess. That's the evil people who are going to go down into the earth. So here we go. V'yikra lenefesh harasha, nefesh behema. Right away we understand that what? That this verse is referring to the soul of the wicked person as a soul of an animal. Mibnei shahanish nimsheket acher atava hagashmit kebehema, because the soul itself is chasing after the physical desires like an animal would. Now, before we get to Yona, that he wants to show us, maybe we'll use this and I'll discuss it. So go to Yona chapter 4, verse 11, where Yona is talking to God. Shall I not take pity upon Nineveh, the great city, in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know their right hand from their left hand, and many animals as well? What is this last part? You don't really hear it, you don't really pick it up in English. But it says, Asher lo yoda bein yamino lismolo, ubehema rabba, and many animals. What does that mean? So before we, he's going to differentiate in the Hebrew, right? We just said over there it was b'nei Adam, the word Adam. Here we have the idea of behemoths. So, ulenefesh hatzadikim, clearly the souls of the righteous are called ruach b'nei ha'adam, the spirit, the soul of man. That's the righteous. And when it comes to, and he gives another proof for that in Ezekiel, Ezekiel 34:31, where Ezekiel says, in God's name, now you are my sheep, the sheep of my pasture, you are man, meaning you're going to listen to me, you're going to listen, you're going to do tshuva, you are man. Okay? So, there was a comment I wanted to mention. This verse in Yona was said by Hashem to Yona in explanation of why he had taken pity on the inhabitants of Nineveh and spared them from destruction. However, the sages teach that the word many animals is referring specifically about the wicked. Okay? Now, Ubir Lashon HaMikra Kainhu Mi Yodea Ruach B'nei Ha'adam V'hem Tzadikim. Now, take this into account. The meaning of the wording of the verse is as follows, right? Who knows how to identify the spirit of man? That is the righteous. Man is going to be called righteous who ascends on high. Who knows? Obviously, Hashem knows. The answer is no one in this world can know who is and who isn't righteous, for there are many righteous people about whom no one can state conclusively in this world, shehem tzadikim be'emet, that they really truly are righteous. V'chein ta'aleh nafsham limarom, and of course, because they're truly righteous, their souls will ascend to heaven. K'inyan shneimar, as it says in 1 Samuel, chapter 16, verse 7. Man sees what his eyes behold, but Hashem sees into the heart. Okay, in Hebrew, right? I read that. Ki ha'adam yireh le'einayim. Man can only see what he sees in front of him. Hashem is yireh le'lev. Le'vav. He can see into the heart. I think it's a very good comment here. True righteousness is marked not only by fulfilling the active mitzvahs and refraining from sins, but by the extent to which a person's inner thoughts and desires are devoted to Hashem. The richness of a person's inner spiritual life remains hidden from others. Only Hashem can assess a person's success with what we call the duties of the heart, and know what thoughts, values, attitudes, and desires lie in a person's mind. It is thus possible that a person appears to be a simple Jew, has reached the highest levels of love and fear of Hashem. Okay, so we just saw that verse. Now, the Gam. Ki Rabbi min tzadikim heim yirei shamayim b'seiser. There are going to be so many righteous people who, in private, they have an awe. They have such a high level of fear of God. Vein tzidkasam moda'at, and nobody really knows the extent to their actions and their values. However, I do want you to know there are people who have been known. Oh yeah, they're known as the town miser, right? People would say, don't even waste your time knocking on his door. He's not going to give you any money, because everyone knows the guy gives a little bit to everybody. But guess what? What happens all of a sudden? This person dies, And there's like hundreds of people in town who all surfaced at the same time and said, all of a sudden, the envelopes that were put under my door are not coming anymore, right? So you think, or you judge the person thinking, oh, he's the miser of the town because he gives everybody just a little bit, and secretly he's giving them a tremendous amount of tzedakah and charity behind the scenes, right? Only after the person dies you find this out. So be careful how you judge people while they're alive. Only God knows. As we already mentioned in Micha chapter 6 verse 8, where Hatznei lechet im Elokecha, right? This is something that should be done. I'll just translate again. Also, many righteous people conceal the extent to which they fear Hashem, and the true level of their righteousness is therefore unknown to others, as we said in Micha, that you should walk modesty with your God. Now, we said earlier about the spirit of the beast. What was that all about? So here King Solomon asked, so who can identify the wicked, whose souls descend to the earth? There are also many, I shouldn't say many, but that's what he says. There are also many, many evil people, and people do not recognize, they don't know the extent of their deeds. As it says in Isaiah chapter 29:15, it says, their deeds are done in secrecy. They say, who sees us and who knows of us? Right? How many evil people think like this? I can only imagine that's what they say. Exactly what Isaiah says. And this verse was explained like this in the Midrash on Ecclesiastes, where it says like this, Ki ruach b'nei Adam, we already said, the spirit of man, that's referring to the tzaddikim, the righteous. And the ruach behema, the spirit of, or the soul of the animal, that's talking about Rishoyim. Now, having established the true meaning, King Solomon, Rebbeinu Yona is now going to reject all alternative ways of reading this. There are people that don't know Tanakh, don't have rabbis to learn with, don't have fathers who taught them the truth about how to learn Tanakh, and they think mistakenly other ideas. So he says like this, Lo yochol ish lomar ki haya mistapek al nishmat ha'adam im tala lamala. Remember how we first read it? King Solomon says, who knows? Maybe they don't go up and maybe they don't go down. Who knows? Who knows? No, don't think. It is impossible for anyone to say that this is not the proper explanation of the verse. The King Solomon was actually wondering whether a person's soul ascends to heaven after death. Of course it does. Ki hine katuv. It's actually written in Koheles. King Solomon himself writes in chapter 12, verse 7, V'haruach tashuv Elokim asher natana, that the soul actually returns to the one who gave it, to Hashem himself. The soul returns. The spirit shall return to God who gave it. There's no question about it. Not only that, furthermore, va'od, ekis tapek al ruach ha'behema im yoredet lamata. How would you have any doubt that the soul of the wicked is going to go down, just like the soul of the righteous is going to go up? Halo ruach habehema min aretz eich ta'aleh. So where else would it go? Why? The spirit of the animal originates from the ground. How can it possibly go up to heaven? So now we're going to look in Genesis, right? The very beginning of creation, where God created the animal from what? The ground. That's where its life force came from. Whereas the life force of man came from the breath of God himself. So let's see what he says. Nitba'er b'Torah ki nishmas ha'adam el yonit. It's a very supernal thing. It comes from the upper worlds. It's clear from the Torah that a person's soul originates from God. Ki katuv al nefesh ha'behema. Whereas when it comes to the animal soul, ki hi min ha'aretz. Look in Genesis chapter 1, verse 24. It says, V'totze aretz nefesh chaya lemina. Right? It's coming out of the ground, the nefesh chaya. The living, well, how do you translate it? Let the earth bring forth living creatures. But it's nefesh chaya, it's the soul itself is coming out of the earth. Whereas by nishmas adam, by the soul of man, even though it says man also came, the physical part came from the ground, what about his soul? Regarding the soul of man, the yipach ba'apav nishmas chayim, that God breathed into his nostrils. He blew into his nostrils the soul of life. Al kain, therefore, ta'aleh nishmas ha'adam b'mos haguf lamala. When the body dies, the soul will go back to its creator. There's no question in King Solomon's mind. Ki kol hadvarim shavim el sharsham, because everything ultimately returns to its source. And we have a verse in Koheles. Hope I'm all good here. We're on page 190 now. In 12:7. Did we see? No, we didn't see that before, did we? It says like this: V'yoshov ha'afar al haaretz k'shohaya v'ruach tashuv el Elokim. Yeah, we saw the latter part of this verse, right? So we said the dust of the human body returns to the ground as it was, but the spirit returns to the God who gave it. Rebbeinu Yona wants to cite further scriptural proof about what happens to the souls of the righteous after death. I remember we recalled in the very beginning the title of this class will be, right, the descent and the ascent of the wicked and the righteous. So it's also stated regarding the souls of the righteous in Zechariah chapter 3 verse 7. V'natati lecha mahalchim bein ha'oimdim me'ela. Now this is interesting because we're talking about the angels, right? We're talking about the tzaddikim. If you do what I tell you to do, you will be standing amongst the angels. Okay? Mahalchim, I'm giving to you, I grant you strides among these omdim. Who are the omdim? Perush, ben malachim, shehem omdim b'kayamim. This is the meaning of the promise. I'm going to grant you strides, that's mahalchim, among the angels who are omdim and are everlasting. So they don't walk, they fly. They do fly. Angels fly. They jump, and they fly. This sense of the word omdim, right? They only have one leg, so they can't walk. Anyway, this sense of the word omdim is along the lines where it's stated elsewhere. Look in Psalms 148, verse 6. V'amideim lo'ad le'olam. Right? He established them forever and ever. So wherever you have the word v'amideim is related to the word omdim, it's the same root, and that connotes the idea of forever. And it says regarding that, kirvat al-chad min kayamaya. So this is in Daniel, right? He approached one of the standing ones. He approached one of the angels. Look in number 17. This is part of Daniel's description of his vision regarding the four kingdoms. From the context, it's clear that one of the standing ones was referring to an angel. So in Hebrew, right, I read that, fine. I approached one of the standing ones. This is just proof that we're talking about the Omdim are the angels, so the righteous will go and where? Reside, live amongst these angels that are forever. So it says in Gemara Shabbos, Ve'amru zichron levracha, nafshotehem shel tzadikim genuzos takas kiseh kavod, that Hashem will take the souls of the righteous and tuck them away, hide them away, secure them, store them away under the throne of glory. We see this in, we spoke about this earlier in 1 Samuel chapter 25, when Abigail was pleading for her husband's life and blessing Dovid that his enemy should end up like the Kafakela. She uses these words that we also use when we use it for Aliyas Neshama, Mishaberach. May the Lord's soul be bound up in the bond of life. This bond of life with Hashem your God. You can't get clearer than that. I think I do want to read this comment, number 19. In summary, at this point, Rebbeinu Yona has demonstrated in his lengthy segment that the souls of the righteous and the souls of the wicked are subject to vastly different fates after death. While the soul of the righteous person ascends heavenward and delights in the pleasure of being close to Hashem's presence, the soul of a thoroughly wicked person is subjected to great punishment, including the punishments of what we call kafakela, as well as Gehenna. So the kafakela is really for the extremely evil people. Now, I was going to stop here and continue the rest of this the next time we meet. But it's actually not that long. I think we should continue. So let's do it. Let's push forward, okay? After speaking about people who live their entire lives without giving serious thought to the day of their death, Rebbeinu Yona discusses at length the fate of the souls of the righteous and the wicked after they die. Rebbeinu Yona now discusses the proper attitudes a person should adopt in light of his mortality. We have to know we do not live forever. I was, when I was in yeshiva in Miami Beach, one of the ways I helped pay for my tuition, I volunteered, if you want to call it volunteering, for the Chevra Kadisha. And I just remember, after my first client met Patira, I spoke to the Rosh Shiva and I said to him, he asked me, how was it? I said, I feel foolish. I really feel foolish saying this, but I feel heavy and I feel extremely hungry. He said, you got in touch with your mortality, your physical, you're talking about seeing death, being involved in death. So what exactly is the Chevra Kadisha? They deal with the tahara, the dunking of the dead body into the mikveh, cleaning the body beforehand. There's a whole process. I'm not going to go into it now, but it was like a little bit spooky. You know what I mean? Your first time. I never saw a dead person in my life, honestly. I mean, except on TV, right? Not in real life. And there was something that you feel like, I don't know. I was extremely hungry. I was never that hungry in my life. It was like really weird. So he explained, you got in touch with your mortality. So we're going to talk about this now. Kol anshe levav yakshu ha'olam hazeh kamo dirat arai. Every wise-hearted person, all wise people, should consider this world as a temporary dwelling. V'lo yishtamshu bo rak la'avodas haborer yisrach. The only reason to use this world, all of our use of this world, is just to be serving Hashem with Yechinu bo tzeda lenafsham, and to use it to prepare all of our provisions for the world to come. Right? You go on a trip, you pack your bags, you make sure you have clean underwear, right? You have your toothbrush, your toothpaste, whatever else you need, your tefillin, right? Your underwear. Anyway, so you just make sure everything is packed, everything is ready to go, because you're going to get up early in the morning, you don't have time in the morning, whatever, anytime you leave, you want to make sure you pack, you have to prepare. Well, this world is just temporary, right? So this is the time to prepare, because the real trip, if I can use that word, is the world to come. Okay, so here it is. This is what life's about. Ki'im shanim rabois yichya. You have all these years to live. Ba'ha'adam ve'elo chaya elef shanim pa'amayim. Even if a person would live many years, even if you live 1,000 years twice over. Achrei sheyesh mispar l'shanav. Even after all those years, yikala hamispar v'sofo kolo hayah. You know what's going to be? It's like you never even lived. That's what's going to be. Since there would be, in the final analysis, some finite numbers to his years in this world, that number would eventually be reached, but in the end it would be as though he never existed. Olam hagmul ein lo tachlit. Whereas the world of reward, meaning the world to come, has no end. You're finished. This world is gone, right? I know some people, I don't know, that they tell me they want to be cremated because they don't want the bugs eating them. I mean, listen, the sooner your body disintegrates, the better off you are. The truly righteous, the bugs are not interested. But the sooner the body disintegrates into the ground, the better off you are, honestly. It says in Job chapter 16, verse 22. For my allotted years will come, and then I will embark on a path from which I will never return. You have to know this world is temporary, meaning any amount of time in this finite world must be viewed as temporary when compared to the eternity of the world to come. Af ki yemei ha'adam b'tzel oiver. I mean, this is a kind of an easy scenario, but basically you're thinking of like a passing shadow. And it's surely proper to adopt this perspective when in reality a person's days in this world are not that long, but are like a passing shadow. So if you go to Psalms chapter 90 verse 10, so this is the last, actually I think we have two verses here. These are the last two verses we're going to deal with. Yemei shanotenu behem shivim shana, as the verse says, the average person lives 70 years, if they're strong 80, right? But it ends off, it is cut off swiftly and we fly away. Yamav b'tzel oiver, it actually says in Psalms 144, verse 4, man is like a breath, his days are like a passing shadow. And it's interesting because the name of our soul, we're called Tselem Elokim. Tselem Elokim means in the image of God. At Tselem, like you want, in modern Hebrew, to take a picture, a camera is called a matslema. It's taking an image. You want to use a Xerox machine? We don't use that term anymore. You know, I mean, a photocopy machine. So you I forget what it's called, but it's the same root, right? It's the same root. So it's to take an image. So it's interesting because shade is also the same. How we are, because we are not God, we are like an image of God. It's like a shadow, right? And that shadow there's really nothing there. It's going to pass on. And, okay. So now, this is kind of like a summary to hit the nail on the head. Right? Rebbeinu Yona cites a teaching of the sages regarding this last verse. It says in Chazal, in Midrash Koheles, Lo bitzilo shel ilan, velo bitzilo shel kotel. Now, by using this metaphor of a passing shadow, the verse means to teach that a person's life is not even like the shadow of a tree or the shadow of a wall, because they remain in a certain place for some time. But rather, it's like a tsel oaf, poreach va'oiver. But our shadow is like a bird flying. You ever see the shadow of a bird? It's zipping by. I mean, it's not, you can watch the shadow of a tree over hours move. We're talking about split seconds here. Rotzon Omar, what do the sages mean by this? Ki chayav ha'odam lahamshil inyan oilam hazeh bilvavo ketzel oaf haporeach ukarega katon. That one should look at their life really as a passing shadow, like the bird is just flying by, which is just split seconds. He says a brief moment in time. That a person in his mind must compare the notion of life in this world to the shadow of a flying bird, which disappears almost immediately after it appears, and thus view life in this world for a brief moment in time. Gam ki ein ha'adam yodea im hayom kan u'machar bekever. You don't even know if tomorrow you're going to be in the ground. You don't know, right? Therefore, comparing to a passing shadow is a perfect example, because a person doesn't know if he's here today or in the grave tomorrow. Nimsa bihishtad lo v'tarcho al yom machar ki hu mitztaer al olam she'enu shalo. Right? This idea is, it turns out the case will emerge that in extending yourself and expending your energy for your tomorrow has caused yourself pain over a world that's not even yours. By viewing life as a passing shadow, a person will be reminded that he could die at any moment, and will be less likely to focus all his energies on the uncertainty, on his uncertain future in this olam hazeh, in this physical world. And that's what the sages mean, as they mention in Gemara Sanhedrin, Al tetzer tzarat machar, ki lo teda ma yeled yom. It's amazing. This is most important lesson everyone should learn. Don't trouble yourselves with tomorrow's problems, because you do not know what a day will bring. All you have is the present. This is all that exists. You don't know, and therefore do tshuva right one day before you die. We spoke about this. I think this was. I'm so glad we finished this paragraph, because it would have been chaval to leave that. But I hadn't really gone over it, that last small bit. But it's a summary, and it's very apropos, and we should look at life like this. And now I'm going to take the Zoom callers, questions or comments, and we'll see you all, not next week, the week after, because next Saturday night, Sunday, we're either going to be feasting or fasting. We do look forward. We are optimistic. There's what to be optimistic about. Every day that passes by, Mashiach is getting closer and closer. How much more troubles can we go through? But the Jewish people, not in a bad sense, but we are koishe oref. We're very stubborn people in a good way. And like it says, keep the faith. And we'll see you in 2 weeks from now. Have a great life. Shavua Tov, Chodesh Tov, during the month of Av. The 15th of Av, Bezrat Hashem, will all be together before or by then. Okay, Kol Tuv.
Yiboneh, 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 Yiboneh,